So, welcome to the resume workshop. Let me introduce myself and tell you a little bit about me. I work at the Travelers Rest Library. I'm a library assistant. I've been a writing tutor in the past, and I've applied to lots and lots of jobs. So, I've seen lots of resumes, edited lots of resumes. So, I'm here to hopefully tell you a little bit about what I've learned and what I've learned over the years, and also just the research I've done in the past couple of months getting ready for this. Before we get started, I just want to remind everyone that speaker view is probably best for this presentation, especially since it's mostly just going to be my presentation on PowerPoint. Please have yourself muted. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat function. That's just fine, and we'll address them as we go along. And have fun and let me know if I can clarify anything or let you know anything in particular. So let's go over what I'm going to talk about today. As far as some of the things I'd like you to take home with you today, I want you to recognize the purpose of a resume. It's actually really important. It's more complicated than you think. Choose a resume style that's best for you. Discover the components of a resume and compose qualifications in a way that is impactful. Most importantly, I want you to familiarize yourself with generally how to write a resume. There are a few hard and fast rules that you'll want to keep in mind all the time, but every resume, every person, every job is unique. And there's a lot of different conflicting advice out there. So let's talk about what the purpose of a resume is and how it can best serve you so you can make it your own. So one of the most helpful resources I found as I was doing research for this presentation is Jeffrey G. Allen's The Resume Makeover. And he describes a good resume as a well-structured, easy-to-read presentation of your own capabilities, accomplishments, short and to the point. Now, why is that the best description for a resume? Well, a resume needs to be all of that because the point of a resume is not to get a job, but to get an interview. It's to impress that employer as concisely as possible, as quickly as possible, with one sheet of paper. And most employers only spend an average of 7 seconds looking at your resume. So during that time, you really need to show the company that you are worth their time to bring in for an interview. And we're going to talk about how to do that most effectively. So, of course, the next logical step is how to make your resume fit that description. So first, let's talk about the 3 resume styles and types. The first is chronological. Now, this is probably the most common type of resume. When you think of a resume, this is probably what you think of, and this is probably what most employers would expect. So this is going to be a list of your job history in reverse chronological order, along with about 3 accomplishments related to each job experience. If you have lots of various work experiences, you can choose the ones that you think will most impress your company that you're applying to. And another good time to use a chronological resume is when you have consistent growth in one job field and have been employed for many years. So here's an example of a chronological resume. What I want you to notice about this resume and about all the resumes that we're going to look at coming up is that it's going to have your name at the very top, followed by your address and your contact information. The name is in bold, it's right in the center, it's really clear who you are, how to contact you. Now you're going to have your job experience in reverse chronological order. So some of these might have a different number of achievements that you've done at each job. One thing to note about this resume is that it's going to have the education at the bottom. Now, we can talk about that a little bit more later on, but in most instances now, you will see the education at the top. But it's going to depend, like we talked about before, different resumes require different configurations. So while this person might have had their education at the bottom because they're well tenured in their field, they've had lots of jobs in the position, and maybe it wasn't that relevant, their level of education. But most instances, you'd want to have your education level at the top. Another thing you'll notice about this resume and about most of the resumes I'm going to show you today is that they have an objective. Now, the objective is something that sort of is starting to fall out of style. It was something that someone who is making a resume would write to say what they wanted out of a job from the employer. Nowadays, they're not that common. However, some employers might expect you to write one. So it's just going to depend again on your job situation. And like this person, you're a tenured professional, maybe a objective statement would be good. You do want the employer to know what you expect. So now the next resume style is the functional/skills resume. Now this is going to showcase clusters of skills, regardless of your work timeline, that you can show off your relevant skills. Here you can name any relevant accomplishment you'd like without necessarily identifying the source of the experience. Now this gives you a lot of freedom. You can edit your resume however you'd like to make it look best for you. Some good times to use a functional resume is when you have not had a previous job or have had little job experience, if you're returning to the job market after an extended absence, or if you're changing careers. So your previous work experience might not match the job you're applying to. So this would be a good opportunity to say, hey, I've had all these different jobs that have taught me these different skills, and just because they're not in the same job market doesn't mean that they're not going to be relevant to me working at this new place. And I just want to welcome those who just popped in. We talked about it a little bit at the beginning. I'm going to take a quick moment to say that if you have any questions, please put it in the chat. I will try to answer them as I go along. And if you have anything in particular that you have questions about, please put that in the chat as well. So I'm going to move right along and show you an example of the functional/skills resume. So here it's very similar to the last one we looked at. Big name at the top, address and contact information. Of course, you'd probably also like to include an email. This one is also going to have an objective. Again, that's something that is falling out of style. Most resumes no longer have objectives. But maybe this person, for the job they're applying for, it was relevant. Generally, you would want your education either at the bottom or the top, depending on how relevant it is to your job. If it's going to be very relevant, you'd like it at the top. If it's going to be less relevant, you can put it at the bottom. And you can see this person did a great job of taking different skills from the different positions they've had in order to make it clear that they can work not just in welding, but also in any other type of maintenance experience. And that brings us to the last type of resume, which is a combination resume. Now that's a mix of components from the functional and chronological resume, and it's kind of can be customized to fit your needs. And that is really, really helpful for a lot of these resumes. If you have job experience, some of it is relevant, some of it may not be. You can put what you think is relevant in there. Again, similar to the skills resume, if you're changing careers, you can put some of your experience in there. You can even take some skills from those careers that you've had in the past and put them in the resume and just pick and choose which you think are relevant. When you're returning to the workforce after an extended absence, I'm sure that even if you haven't been in the workforce for a while, you've done things to develop skills that will be beneficial to you in the next job. A combination resume is really useful too, because you really get to pick and choose. Like, let's say you volunteered somewhere and you won an award, but you might not have the necessary job experience. You can make it along as you go. So I'm going to go ahead and show you another example.
We do have one question in the chat.
Great.
Is it mandatory to keep all kinds of resumes to one page?
That's a really good question. Generally, I would say yes, unless you are a very tenured professional with decades and decades of work experience. We talked about this a little bit at the beginning, that resumes, the point of a resume is not necessarily to get a job, but to get an interview. And most employers only spend an average of 7 seconds looking at a resume. So if it takes longer than that, or it's harder to look at, then they might not, then it might be harder to keep their attention. They might just say, I don't have time to look through this big long resume. Let me look at the next one. But we're gonna learn how to pack as much information in and make you look as good as we can in the one sheet of paper during this presentation. We're gonna learn how to do that. So back to the resume styles and types. I just finished talking a little bit about the combination resume. So here's a good example right here. You've got skills from different work experiences, and then volunteer experience. That is a great opportunity to throw in something extra that you've done to make you look good for the job you're applying for. So that's about it. Are there any questions about the styles and types? So the next thing to consider when you're writing a resume are the components. So this is really the meat and potatoes of your resume. So there's 3 different components we're going to talk about. The first is your content. So this is going to be what is in your resume. What information are you putting on the page? So I know I showed you some examples earlier of having your basic information at the top. So your name, your address, your telephone number, and your email address. Keep in mind to have a very professional email address, probably something just your first name, your last name at whatever.com would work. It used to be more acceptable to have fun email addresses, but now it's best to keep things as professional as you can. Of course, your education. I know we talked about this earlier, but listing your degrees, your institutions, graduation year, and where you put that in your resume, which we can talk about a little bit later. Your work experience in reverse chronological order, if it's applicable, your skills, if it's applicable, special honors, if applicable, and your references, which you will want to list in your resume. I have also read some conflicting things about that. Always ask your references before you put them on your resume, and generally do write their name and their number on the piece of paper that you turn in as your resume. It has been popular before to say references available upon request. Nowadays, that's not as popular because it puts an impetus on the employer to do an extra step, which is to reach out to you to ask for those references. So now it's probably best to just include your references on your resume. I did leave out an objective statement on the content because it's no longer really that widely used. But there are lots of good information and resources about the objective statement if you feel that your employer would appreciate one or if your employer asks for one. The next component is going to be your format. So when I say format, I'm talking about the resume type that we talked about earlier. This will also help you decide on your content. Deciding the best order to list your information, such as your education, which we've talked a lot about. Designing your resume so it's easy to read, and using fonts, bullet points, indentions, and other stuff like that to just make your resume professional. I know Word Docs has a lot of pretty templates, and so does Google Docs and all those different things to make your resume look good. Those can be useful, but I would really avoid making your resume too busy. One thing you might want to focus on is just the plain black and white one-page resume, and really letting your achievements and your writing style speak for themselves. One exception to this would be someone in a graphic design career. If you are applying for a job where design might be an important part of your job description, you'd want to consider that when making your resume. You want to display what you can do in your resume. All right, now this is the last component, which is style. And that is using your writing to best sell yourself to the company. Now, this is really important, and this is something that can really make you stand out from the crowd. It's researching the company, figuring out what their values are, and trying to emulate them in your resume. Now, this might be asking yourself questions or searching on your own for the answers like, what type of language do they use? What type of keywords do they use? What are their goals as a company? And how can you exhibit that you can help them reach those goals on your resume? And not just that, but proving to them that you've done your research. Employers would be really impressed if they're reading your resume and they see that you've mentioned something that they talk about on their website or on their mission statement. And that is a really quick and easy way to make your resume go from basic to extraordinary. We're going to talk about accomplishments next, but making sure that they're simple, easy to understand, and concise, but also very impressive. And we're going to talk about that next. And the last one is to proofread. This is so important. If an employer is reading your resume and they see a really obvious or really glaringly awkward typo, it is going to be really bad for your resume. It might not necessarily be an automatic, an automatic put you in the no pile, but it may, depending on the job. So just be really careful, show that you put that extra care and attention into your resume, and proofread really hard. Get someone else to proofread it for you. You're welcome to send it to one of us and we'll get it proofread for you. That's really important. So that's about it for the components. Are there any questions? Is everyone clear on everything? We're going to talk a lot about your accomplishments next. And now this is probably going to be the most important part of this presentation. If you take anything away, this is what I want you to learn, because this is going to be the meat and potatoes of your resume. So the question is, how can you describe your accomplishments most efficiently? We talked before that employers only spend about 7 seconds looking at any given resume. So, how can we show them during that time, using our accomplishments, that we're the best fit? So, this one really good formula is an action verb plus a quantifiable result. Now, we're going to talk about action verbs a little bit next. And we talked before about composing your accomplishments to appeal to the company you're applying for. So keep that in mind as we're talking about composing your accomplishments. So I'm going to talk a little bit about action verbs and why they're so important. First is because they are specific. They show the employer the specific action that you've taken. Takes away all possibility of question, vagueness. It tells you exactly what you've done. The next is that they're the best way to start a sentence about your accomplishments. It lets them know immediately that you are someone that does important things, and here is the important thing that you've done. Next is that it adds variety to your resume so that your resume doesn't get too repetitive or too boring. Like, I did this, or I managed a team. This is going to be specific. It's going to make it more interesting to read. And because it adds variety and makes it more interesting to read, it's going to make it easier to read. It's a lot easier to read something that catches your interest than it is to read something boring. And that's true of anything, of a fiction book or a nonfiction book. Something's going to be a lot easier to read when it's interesting, a lot more fun to read. You're going to want to keep reading it. You're going to want to know more. And this is true of resumes as well. So action verbs, super, super important. Always try to implement them when you can, if you can. And so I'm going to show you guys some examples, and I'm going to send a lot more out to you, so don't feel like you've got to write these all down. But some examples would be to transform, synthesize, sustain, revamp, generate, vitalize. They're all really powerful words that show that you've done something. Mastered, championed. I mean, these are really powerful words. So that's the first step in our formula to writing down our accomplishments. The next step is the result. So you did something, you did an action, you've got a good action verb. What did you do? Did you help save people money? Did you improve the lives of others? Did you create lesson plans? Choose an action verb that emphasizes the action you took and show the result of that action. And the final step is to quantify. Quantify if you can and where you can. Show how much of something you did. Employers really like that when they can put a number to your action. How many patients did you take care of? How many classes did you offer? How many students did you teach? How much money did you save the company? Saying, if you have an accomplishment that says save the company money, that sounds promising. But if you say championed budget to save $3,000 in financial year 3, that is a lot more specific and a lot more impressive. So I want to show you guys some examples. I've got everything highlighted so we can see the different parts of the sentences and how they're impressive and how they follow the formula. So first, we've got realized 30% data management efficiency improvement as company-wide software upgrade champion. Now that's got a lot of different powerful words in there. So first is our action verb. So we realized something. We took something from an idea and made it reality. The next is our quantified. So 30% data management efficiency. We made it 30% more efficient, and the result was improvement as company-wide software upgrade champion. So that's pretty impressive. Ensured, so that's our action verb. Quality patient-centered care is our result for 100-bed Alzheimer's unit. That sounds very impressive. 100 patients with Alzheimer's, you ensured quality patient-centered care. So here is what I want to show you. I talked a little bit about this earlier, but how we can go from an ordinary sentence to a really strong achievement. So let's say this is something you did at your job. You took commercial and construction loan applications. Sounds important enough. I'm sure you did that. But if you want to make it a lot stronger, the first thing you have to do is get rid of the word took. It's so vague. It doesn't tell you anything about what you did. You took them. You could have just taken them from someone. It's not clear. When you say you executed, now that is a lot more clear and it is a lot more impressive. 10 billion. Now that is a lot more impressive than just taking commercial and construction loan applications. 10 billion in commercial construction loan applications for the top commercial lender in Eastern Missouri. Now that sounds way more impressive. You've packed good information into one sentence. You've made it clear that you can get something done, you can handle large amounts of money, and that you can work with powerful people, the top commercial lender in Eastern Missouri. So let's say you worked on the company website. Well, I'm sure lots of people have worked on the company's website, but what specifically have you done? You generated 35% increase in sales by designing and implementing online landing page for new product launch. There you packed a lot more information that is going to impress an employer. You've generated something, 35% increase, which is your quantified, and you've designed and implemented an online landing page for new product launch. It's a lot more specific, tells your employer a lot more about you and your achievements. Now, this is some of the literature I used to inform me today. Resume Makeover by Jeffrey G. Allen, Knock 'em Dead Resumes, The Perfect Resumes. These are all books that we have in the Greenville County Library System. We also have some digital databases I refer to on the right. So the WorksSC, that's a database offered by the State Library. It's really useful. Ferguson Career Guidance Center and LinkedIn Learning. Those are on the Greenville Library website, and you'll be able to access those with your library card. Thank you, Rachel. Rachel put it in the chat box. Now, if you have any questions about how to access those, please let me know. One thing to keep in mind as you are looking at resume resources is that I've talked a lot over the lesson about how things have changed a lot over the years. Expectations have changed. It used to be acceptable to do a 2-page resume. Now it's really not, only in certain circumstances. Please try to reference something current. And if it's not something current, then make sure you're looking at multiple different sources. People will just give you different information. And the information I'm giving you today, aside from the accomplishments, which will be true any time you do a resume, might not be what another employee expects. I think it's the best information, but everything is different. So be sure to look at multiple different things, websites, books, different books, um, that is probably going to be your best bet about how to make your best resume with consulting different information. And that's about all I have for you today. Was are there any more questions that I can answer, or is there anything back at the beginning of the presentation that I can refer to?
I have a question.
Yes.
Um, I know you mentioned avoiding resume templates that are super colorful and very busy. Have you heard about people using templates that you can buy from Etsy instead of just using Microsoft Word ones? Do you think that those are professional, or would you suggest sticking with some more standard template styles?
That's a good question. Um, I am not familiar with those, to be honest. I would think that you maybe shouldn't have to spend your money to get a good resume. You can do it on your own with what's available to you on Word. Um, it depends on how you feel about it, but I really think that you can do it on your own. I mean, most employers, like I said earlier, unless they're a graphic design or if design is somehow important in your job, in which case you should probably be designing it yourself and not buying one on Etsy. Um, just want to see your accomplishments. They don't need anything fancy. So the only thing that needs to be fancy is your accomplishments and the way that you compose your resume and that you look professional. Well, if there aren't any more questions, all right, thank you. Everyone, have a good evening and thanks for coming by.